Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here to share with you 3 dumb things that I used to do in my home studio. Thing number 1, not using reference mixes in the right way. Let me explain. When I started out, like many others, I'd become obsessed with my favorite records and the way that they sounded. For example, let's say there was a snare sound that I really loved the sound of and I wanted to have that type of snare sound within my own production. I would listen to the reference mix and then listen to the mix that I was working on regardless of what the source tracks sounded like, and I would try to EQ my snare drum to sound exactly like the reference mix, without ever considering the fact that maybe the drummer on the reference mix was using a completely different snare drum than the drummer on my mix was using. Or maybe the reference mix used a snare sample and I was using a live snare in my mix. These thoughts wouldn't even enter my mind. I would just sit there messing around with compressor settings, EQ settings, boosting the snare, cutting the snare, clipping the snare. I would try everything under the sun only to be frustrated when my snare drum didn't sound like the reference snare. And I was guilty of this with vocal sounds, guitar sounds, bass sounds, cymbal sounds, the loudness of my mix. Again, without ever considering the fact that I was working with a different band and different source tones. And it took years, many years, for me to realize that the way I should have been using reference mixes is to just judge it by the overall balance and tonal characteristics. You're never gonna get your snare drum to sound exactly like another snare drum unless it's the same sample or was recorded in the same room with the exact same snare with the same drummer. You're never gonna get your guitars to sound identical to your favorite record unless it's the exact same impulse response taken from the record. And your vocals are never gonna sound exactly the same unless you're working with the exact same singer, with the exact same microphone in the exact same room. So finally it clicked in my head and I started using reference mixes the right way, which is just for big picture tonal balance. Dumb thing number 2, using the exact same EQ preset on every single guitar track that I was working on. So here's a quick little story. When I started it out, I was obsessed with guitar tone, like many are. And I remember back in 2006, sitting at my laptop, EQing this one guitar track that I was working on, again, comparing it to other records, finally thinking that I found the holy grail of all EQ presets. And as a matter of fact, here is that exact EQ preset. Way overdone. But in my mind back then, I thought I, again, had found the holy grail of EQ presets, and I used this on every mix I did between the years 2006 and 2009. It didn't matter to me if it was a live amp, an amp sim. I used this EQ preset, this very dumb EQ preset, mind you, on every guitar sound because I thought it was the answer to good guitar tone. Luckily, I finally smartened up and realized it all comes down to the source and you only need to EQ what needs to be EQ'd. Now the EQ curves on my plugins look more like this on my guitars. As you could tell, that is a huge difference. It took me years to smarten up, but what can I say? I'm a late bloomer. And dumb thing I used to do, number 3. And this is kind of a combo. Rushing into recording and rushing into mixing. Now what I mean by rushing into recording is I would skip pre-production. So for example, back then when it would be a drum day with a band that I was working with, I wouldn't have them come in a week earlier to map out tempos. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even ask them if we were gonna be using a click or not. Nowadays, I won't ever do a record without using a click, but back then I was more loosey-goosey and I would do whatever the band would wanna do. And because I wouldn't take pre-production seriously and I wouldn't plan, we would sometimes be sitting there for hours mapping out tempos. So when it came time to actually tracking drums, the drummer was completely exhausted and the vibe was just killed in the room. Nowadays, I will schedule specific sessions just for pre-production, or I will request that the band does the pre-production on their own. Either way, the preparation is there. So when it comes time to track, it's smooth sailing. And when it came to rushing into mixing is I would completely breeze through the recording process, not paying close attention to tuning issues, if things needed to be edited, if the drum fills match with the bass parts or the guitar parts. No, I thought that the secrets were all in mix tricks. This was more of an issue with my own music. I would really just breeze through the recording. Again, I just couldn't wait to get to the mix because I thought the secret to great production was just a bunch of mix tricks. Now, I was fortunate enough to have interned at a pro studio and I got to see how pros actually worked, and they did not skip anything in terms of pre-production and recording. And after I had this experience and I got to see how important these stages were, I did not mess around with pre-pro, and I definitely didn't mess around with tracking. And lo and behold, my mixes started to improve automatically. Mixing became a million times easier because I wasn't rushing these crucial stages in the production process. Now you might be watching this video and thinking, man, this guy was a complete idiot, but I'm just being honest. These were things that I would actually do back then. Luckily, I could laugh about this now, but I've decided to make this video just in case there's someone out there making these mistakes. Save yourself the time, save yourself the energy, save yourself the frustration, and learn from my mistakes. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And do not forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload one of my weekly videos on all things metal and rock production. You can both like and follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Links are in the description below. And be sure to download my free quick EQ guide that contains all my EQ settings that I always return to when I start a mix. There's a link below, right within this video's description. Till next time, happy recording.